Hello, this is Liz, Derry Public Library's one of the resident film nerds and definite trash and cult movie expert, and one of the reference librarians. It is Wednesday, meaning we are going on a journey to my favorite streaming service, Amazon Prime. As usual, I promise I won't get too weird with my recommendations for this. There is, however, one movie that I've been waiting for it to come on so that I may recommend it. So I've recommended Robert Eggers' The Witch on Netflix, and his sophomore effort, The Lighthouse, is now on Prime. So I loved The Witch. It was my favorite movie of 2016. And I was very excited for The Lighthouse. I am just going to give a big caveat. This is not a movie for everybody, but Robert Eggers put so much work into crafting this world. It essentially takes place in the 1800s, two men who are guarding a lighthouse. It is an unlikely dark buddy comedy about isolation, starring Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. He put a lot of work into making sure the costumes were accurate, the dialect was accurate, and Pattinson and Dafoe actually studied how to speak in this kind of dialect. So I would say if you liked The Witch, definitely check this out. If you like quirky period pieces, check this out. I am just gonna say it is both funny, it is a little frightening, it is definitely odd, but there was no other movie like it in 2019. And I think now, since a lot of people are kind of isolated and might be going a little bit stir crazy, who knows, we might be able to relate to this movie a bit. The next one I'm going to recommend, a little bit more somber. This was a little seen Richard Linklater film from 2018 called Last Flag Flying. It stars Steve Carell and Lawrence Fishburne. Steve Carell plays a former veteran whose son has died and he's going to retrieve his body. And I like Richard Linklater. I don't think he makes really any bad movies. There's certainly some where they're not as good as others, but I think this is a really good kind of a straight drama. And if you want a good drama that's just full of good writing and good performances, I would check out Last Flag Flying. I think it was very underseen and underappreciated. Next was another movie from last year that I really enjoyed, and I would definitely say underseen and underappreciated, especially with some conversations we're having about housing and gentrification, is the film The Last Black Man in San Francisco. And this is a debut feature from director Joe Talbot, and it was partially written by him and by the star Jimmy Fails. And it's about a young man who his family used to own this beautiful townhouse in San Francisco, and they don't. And he has this his pretty much his entire drive in life is to get that house back. And it is a metaphor. It's wants to talk about a film that talks about gentrification and how it's becoming harder for working class families to live in these cities, and they're consistently pushed to the outskirts. But it's also about finding your place in the world. And it is not a perfect movie, but I think it's a really good first effort from the director. And I think it's got a lot of great performances in it. So definitely check that one out. Next is, speaking of first features, this really took me and a lot of people not quite by surprise, but we were very psyched for it when we saw the trailers back in 2009. And we finally saw it, we were very happy. And I'm talking about District 9. I do not think Neil Blomkamp has had a great movie since then. I think Chappie's entertaining. Elysium, good idea, best execution, but it is why I don't support rich people going into space privately, because I'm like, oh no, they're just going to save themselves. We're all staying on Earth. I don't trust it. But District 9 is a wholly good and original sci-fi vision. So Blomkamp is from South Africa, and this is about an alien ship kind of crashes or is stranded here, and the aliens essentially start living here. So it's in South Africa. Obviously, there's an apartheid metaphor with it. It is a really good film and a very good thing to point to when people say that sci-fi is not a political genre, which obviously, if you know the history of sci-fi, you know that's not a true statement. I wish Blomkamp's other films were as good as District 9, but if you want a good sci-fi feature, watch District 9. We're staying somber, but getting a little quiet drama, Wendy and Lucy. I talked about Kelly Reichardt a couple of weeks ago for directing, and Wendy and Lucy first years I saw, and I absolutely love it. It is just a girl and her dog. It is a woman. She's transient. She's trying to get to Alaska, and her dog is her only consistent companion. I would definitely say bring tissues if you're a dog person. Don't worry, the dog makes it through alive. I feel like I should put that up front, but great performance from Michelle Williams, and it's a good, quiet, understated drama, and I absolutely love it. I love recommending it to people. Next, we're going to go down just for some classics. The first is probably one of the most well-known comedies of all time. It's Some Like It Hot, and if you don't know about this movie, well, nobody's perfect, but if I have to recap it, Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis are on the run. They disguise themselves as women. They befriend Marilyn Monroe. Everyone is just on their A game. It is an absolute great comedy, and there's a reason it has endured for so many years. The second is a classic, but of a different genre, blaxploitation, which is one of my favorite sort of mini genres, and it is Foxy Brown, the eponymous Pam Grier. Blaxploitation is a really interesting genre because it was in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, a lot more people started to be able to get the freedom to make movies themselves. That's how we saw sort of grindhouse features, low budget movies come about, or almost guerrilla filmmaking. But we also saw Black people start to make their own films, and that's kind of where blaxploitation, to give like a very brief overview, came from. And Foxy Brown, I think, completely endures as a main character, mainly because of Pam Grier's performance, and it endures as an action movie. And it definitely has earned its place on the mantle of culturally significant cinema. So the last two movies I'm going to recommend that are free on Prime are two documentaries. The first is definitely a, somber watch. I keep going back and forth between fun and somber. It's I Am Not Your Negro, directed by Raoul Peck. This is about James Baldwin. If you don't know who James Baldwin is, he was an African-American culture and writer from the 60s. His book, If Beale Street Could Talk, was adapted into a film recently. And this is a very heavy film to watch because Baldwin was an observer. He saw what it was like to live as a Black person in America. He knew what it was like to live as a gay man in America. And his observations about the country that he did call home were not exactly flattering. But documentaries like this are things that people need to see because sometimes we do have to confront not great truths about our past and about our society. The other one I'm going to recommend is a little bit more fun. So as I joke, I'm Derry's resident trash and cult movie expert. I'm a child of the VHS generation of little, not even Blockbuster, but small independently owned stores. And there's a documentary called VHS. So if you would like to know why I have such an affinity for those types of movies and for that era of VHS cover art of these films that were kind of forbidden, that you heard other people talk about and you kind of had to see, this is a great movie to see. And it also goes into how there was kind of a moral panic around these movies, especially in England, where they did try to ban or censor some of these films. So it's not just, I like garbage. I think that there is an interesting history behind them. And it's interesting to go back and watch some of these movies and go, really, you were offended by this and you wanted to edit it? I could actually do an entire live stream about the video nasty controversy in Britain, but that might be for another day. The final two films I do want to recommend, now they are pay and rentals, but they are important films, and I think people should see them. The first is Star 80, and this is about Bossy, came out in 1983, and it is about the very brief career and death of Dorothy Stratton. So if you're not familiar with this, Dorothy Stratton was a playmate. She reached her fame around 19 and by 20 was killed by her abusive husband. And this is a very angry film. And it is angry and condemning of an industry that makes its money off of exploiting women. And it is condemning without being puritanical, but it essentially shows that this poor woman was exploited pretty much from the minute she turned 18 till her death by her husband and other older men, in some cases, older women. And I think Bob Fosse, a person who's worked in the film industry himself, he probably saw that happen. Great, frightening performance by Eric Roberts, and Mariel Hemingway is fantastic as Dorothy Stratton. It's definitely you're going to need a stiff drink after watching it because it's a difficult movie, but I think it is one of the best movies made about the dark side of show business. And the other film I'm going to recommend is 2011's A Separation. I mentioned this yesterday on my Netflix recommendation when I said that really should have won Best Picture for 2011. And I think that was the best movie made that year. I think Roger Ebert put that on the top of his list. It's a very simple story. Couple living in Iran. The wife wants to go to America. The husband wants to stay because his father is dying. They're getting a divorce. And I think that were it not made by an Iranian, I think the lines that are drawn would be far more binary, far more black and white. Whereas this film, the director is Iranian. There is no one who is completely in the right. There are 4 different adults involved, and all of them are given sort of equal time, equal say. No one is a villain. And it's a very complex drama. And I think that movies like this are important not only because, they're complex and they're well written, but because it gives us a view into these cultures very reductive or limited view of. So if you want to get a good look at Iranian cinema, I would definitely recommend A Separation, or once the library opens, we do have a copy. So thank you for watching my video. I will be back tomorrow with What's on Hulu, and have a great day.